Let's talk about filing petitions for your kids, whether these are children or adults, married or unmarried. This is the video for you. So first of all, let me start by talking about petitioning for adult sons or daughters. So these can be children over the age of 21. Whether they're married or unmarried makes a huge difference in the situation, and whether you're a permanent resident or a US citizen actually doesn't make that much of a difference in this situation. I hear people say, like, I'm a permanent resident, there's a petition pending for my adult son or daughter, he's like 25 years old, he lives back home in our home country, he's not married, and how long is it going to take? And the answer is it's going to take around 8 years before a visa becomes available, and then you have to continue with the National Visa Center process. Let's say that takes 3 months, and then it's going to get transferred to the consulate, and you have to wait for the consulate to schedule an interview, and it's going to depend on the processing times of that specific consulate. So the minimum it's probably going to take based on current visa bulletin times is going to be around 8 years. And the question is, well, what if I become a citizen while this petition is pending? Can I speed it up? And the interesting and kind of sad answer is no. It's probably going to add 9 months to the processing times based on the current visa bulletin timeframes. The visa bulletin charts, you can find it by just Googling Department of State Visa Bulletin. And when you click on the link, it'll show you the visa bulletin for the current month. And there will be like a somewhat complicated chart if you've never seen this before. And that chart tells you when the priority date for that category of petition becomes current. And on that chart, you'll notice that the category for adult sons or daughters of US citizens is actually slightly more backlogged than the category for adult sons or daughters of permanent residents. So in this one situation, it's not advisable to naturalize if your goal is to bring your adult son or daughter to the US as fast as possible. Now, what happens if you're petitioning for an adult son or daughter who's married, or while the case is pending, they get married? Well, that's probably going to automatically add like 5 years to the process. The current processing time for adult sons or daughters who are married is currently around 13 years. Now, the one good thing about these categories of petition is that you can include their spouse or children on the petition. Even if they weren't initially included on it, you could always update it once it gets to the National Visa Center portion of the case. And you don't need to file a separate petition for the spouse or child, which are known as derivative beneficiaries. One final note that I want to make before we move on to the next part of this video is, if your adult son or daughter is in the US and they're out of status, whether they entered without inspection to begin with, or they entered with a visa, which is usually the scenario I see, and they overstayed their visa for whatever reason, whether it was a student visa, tourist visa, it doesn't really matter. You cannot really benefit from this type of family petition if your plan is to adjust status within the United States. That family member, whenever it's a preference category, this isn't just adult sons or daughters, and if you don't know what I mean by preference category, I've done videos specifically explaining the difference between immediate relative family petition categories and preference family petition categories. Whenever it's a preference category petition, the family member cannot adjust status in the US if they're currently out of status. So they must have entered legally, and they must currently be in a valid non-immigrant status if their plan is to adjust status in the US. And it's hard to maintain a valid non-immigrant status for that much time, but there are instances where it does work out. For example, if you filed a petition for your adult son or daughter like 8 years ago, and now the visa is current and they entered the US as a tourist, there are some immigrant intent issues that are beyond this video, but theoretically, while they're in the US, they could apply for adjustment of status as long as they entered with the intention to leave and then they changed their mind after they entered the US. Or something that's happened before is after they enter the US, the visa becomes available because there's some major update to the visa bulletin where the dates move forward a whole bunch, and then now all of a sudden they're eligible to adjust status and they need to decide whether they're going to do that. or go back and try to consular process through the embassy in their home country. The other category of petition that I want to discuss is unmarried children who are under age 21 of US citizens. So children of US citizens who are under age 21 and unmarried. These are considered to be immediate relative petition categories. And these people, when they're in the US, are immediately eligible for adjustment of status. So you can generally file the I-130 and I-485 applications concurrently. You don't need to wait for the I-130 petition to get approved before you apply for adjustment of status. And you can even do this if they are out of status in the US, and generally that means a visa overstay. It's still required that they have entered the US with inspection or parole. They must have legally entered or fixed an illegal entry after they entered by being paroled or something similar, but they are eligible for adjustment of status in the US when they meet these requirements, and of course all the other requirements of adjustment of status. If they are outside of the US, you have to file the I-130 first, and the plan will be for them to consular process, but there's no mandatory like visa bulletin waiting time. A visa is immediately available for that category. It's just gonna take as long as it takes for the I-130 to get approved. It's gonna go to the National Visa Center, which will add like 3 months to it. And then it's gonna go to your consulate in your home country, and it's gonna depend on their processing times. Right now, people ask me how long is it going to take to petition when it's an immediate relative category and the kid's outside of the US. And I say you should allot like a year to a year and a half for the I-130 when they're outside of the US and you're a US citizen, and then another 3 months for the National Visa Center, and then however long it takes for it to get transferred to the consulate and an interview there. In a lot of countries, that whole process can be done in under 6 months. So around 2 years, start to finish, is pretty standard unless you're from a country that has like severe visa interview date backlogs. Like for example, Bangladesh has really severe backlogs for certain countries. It could be several years before they could even schedule an interview. And that's on top of all the other processing times for the I-130 and National Visa Center. And if it's a preference category, it's going to take even longer because now you need to wait for the visa to become available before they'll even consider trying to schedule an interview. So backlog on top of backlog on top of backlog when you're from certain countries. I'm going to end by saying that on top of all of these backlogs and increased processing times, we're seeing delays under the Trump administration as they cut resources for these consulates. If you're from a country that's subject to a travel ban, it's going to be even worse because your I-130 will get approved, you'll get scheduled for your interview, but after that, you're just going to be subject to the ban, and then we're going to need to try to apply for an exception or a waiver or an exemption. We're yet to see exactly how that's going to play out because it's a little too soon. I'll keep you guys updated on that as more information becomes available. If you're new to my channel, I try to put out several videos each week on family-based immigration. I myself am an immigration attorney based in New York. I handle cases nationwide. So if you want to talk to me about a family-based immigration case, you could always schedule a consultation. My information is in the video description below, and I'll see you guys next time for another video.